Democrats are criticizing those 23 Republicans who voted against the anti-hate resolution. Here's Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel-Powell, an immigrant from Ecuador.
We are sending a mixed message when you're voting against a resolution that is clearly standing against hate. I can't speak for any of them that voted against it, but I do worry that it continues to exacerbate the problem that we have coming from this White House and this president, which is to use hateful words against people like myself.
Several members, particularly Democrats, being asked today why they didn't do maybe a dual resolution that would include anti-Semitism and all of the other things that they feathered into this one. It would be helpful to talk with one of those 23 Republicans who voted against it. So let me bring in Texas Congressman Louie Gohmert, who sits on the House Judiciary Committee and is one of those who said no to this measure. Why did you vote against it?
Well, as I said on the floor yesterday, we needed to take on the anti-Semitism that was clearly expressed, a bigotry, a hatred that needed to be addressed, needed to be called out. And you have the Speaker even saying that this wasn't about Congresswoman Omar. We didn't address it. We just generally said, basically we were against hate, except maybe not the kind of hate of a Democrat that hated Republicans and tried to kill a number of them, shot Steve Scalise. No. And, or the violence against Trump supporters. But even as horrible as the shooting of Steve Scalise, there is no moral equivalence to any of those things called out in this resolution yesterday, or even things that weren't named. No moral equivalence to the Holocaust. 6 million people killed because they were part of a race, part of the children of Israel between 1933 and 1945. When people have said never again, they meant never again. But this doesn't, yesterday, that didn't mean never again. It means we're starting this process all over again.
Let me ask it a different way. If it had not been for Representative Omar's comments, would you have been talking about anti-Semitism on Capitol Hill? And from the examples that you gave, many other things that perhaps need to be spoken about that are outside the realm of this.
Well, I'm sure we would have been, because the anti-Semitic feelings are there. They are being expressed, whether it was by her or someone else. But it is critical, whether you're a Bonhoeffer or anybody else, when you hear anti-Jewish remarks being made, and I'm not talking about criticism of somebody who just happens to be Jewish. I'm talking about slandering an entire race of people. Then, it's got to be called out. That's how the Holocaust began. Eventually, people quit calling it out, and then that led to more and more jumping on the bandwagon, and before you knew it, there were 6 million people killed. We just can't let that happen again.
And in terms of religion, because that's what we're talking about with the Jewish faith here, not a race of people. But, Democrats and Republicans are seeing this so differently, and it's getting kind of chippy in terms of what's being said. Representative Debbie Mucarsel-Powell had this to say, criticizing Republicans. All right, we'll move on. She had said, and we showed you a little bit of what she said earlier, criticizing those of you who went against this. My colleague Bill Himmer asked this earlier. I'm asking it too. Why not do 2 resolutions? Did anybody talk about that? You could have done one anti-Semitism and then put in all these other things that Democrats said that they wanted to put in.
We would have been fine with that. But as we were told, no, we're still working on the resolution. So they kept having different iterations of the same resolution, adding more and more. They didn't want to call out anti-Semitism directly. They wanted to blend it in so they wouldn't offend anybody. And then the end result was that it offended people who are very concerned about another Holocaust coming about someday. So, Harris, you're right. That would have been a good idea. It would have been far better. And if that had been what we did, then I could have voted for a resolution generally decrying hate. But we needed one directly calling out the anti-Semitic comments.
All right, Representative Gohmert from the great state of Texas, I appreciate getting your perspective on it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for your good questions.